Well, it's right. You'll need your umbrella tomorrow.
Okay. All
But
right.
other than that, it's a beautiful day.
Good. Good, good, good.
Hey, good evening, everybody. My name is Kevin Olson. I'm a recovered alcoholic.
Hey.
I want to welcome you all to the fourth dimension.
Yeah.
Big book study, that is. I'm glad you guys are all here. I know I'm certainly glad I'm here. I never feel more alive than when I'm sharing the miracle of the recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous that we access through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous that I discovered in a book called Alcoholics Anonymous. And let's share that book together tonight, shall we? As we always do, we will begin tonight with the set-aside prayer. And it goes a little something like this. Sing along if you know the words. God, please help me to set aside everything I think I know about you, about me, about my fellow man, and about the 12 steps. And please allow me to gain a fresh new vision, perspective, and understanding of what you, what me, what my fellow man, and the 12 steps are all about. Amen. Okay, and as this is the fourth dimension big book study, I always like to read the two parts of our book that refer to the fourth dimension. So first of all, on page 8, Bill Wilson writes, I was soon to be catapulted into what I like to call the fourth dimension of existence. I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. And then on page 25, Bill Wilson writes that we have found much of heaven and we have been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence of which we had not even dreamed. All right, brothers and sisters, we're going to be catapulted. We're going to be rocketed. And for the sake of the tradition and the custom of the fourth dimension big book study, everyone who will, please put one hand up like this. And everybody, please put another hand up like this. And everybody go, oh, yeah. I never get tired of it. I never get tired of that. We absolutely insist on enjoying life in Alcoholics Anonymous. We absolutely insist. And I'm going to have fun tonight, man. I hope you guys will have fun tonight. It's entirely optional, but it's highly suggested. Yeah, let's get into it. I must admit, I was thrown off for a second, Judy, at the very beginning when he said, Kevin, what's happening tomorrow? I thought you were talking to me. And I was like, I don't know what's happening tomorrow. I'll tell you what's happening today is a lot of people are drinking green beer right now. Green beer. It's National Green Beer Day. Raise your hand if you ever drank green beer. I did not ever drink green beer. Raise your hand if you ever drink Irish whiskey. All right, I'll put my hand up for Irish whiskey. That's for sure. That's for sure. And let me be clear. I was never opposed to drinking green beer. If somebody would have handed me a green beer, I would have drank a green beer. I drank a lot worse stuff than green beer. I never had the pleasure. Probably because, anyway. Yeah. I didn't like being out with normies when they were out partying. You know what I mean? St. Patrick's Day, I don't want to be out drinking it's amateur night. When the amateurs are out drinking, like the worst night of drinking in the world. What's the worst night as an alcoholic? The worst night of the year to go out drinking? Everybody knows on this call, I bet. New Year's Eve, right? None of us. I stay at home and drink alone on New Year's Eve, man, because all the amateurs are out, man. I don't want to get involved in any of that. So anyway, guys, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be sharing this work with you tonight, man. And we're going to be picking up where we left off last week in the forward to the second edition. And as I kind of alluded to last week, for years in Alcoholics Anonymous, man, I didn't even touch the prefaces and the forewords or any of the Roman numeral stuff. I don't read that stuff. Prefaces and Roman numerals and stuff, that stuff's for losers, man. I don't read that stuff. I start on page 1, and consequently, I missed a lot of the very most important information in our book. Certainly, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be talking about the doctor's opinion, Dr. Silkworth in step 1, and I missed all of that. Okay, but one of the coolest things that I've learned in Alcoholics Anonymous, and frankly, one of the most foundationally important things that I've learned in AA. And one of the things that changed my entire perspective, perception understanding of Alcoholics Anonymous, who we are, where we came from, and what we're doing here, and what the real purpose of AA is, was to learn AA history, the early history of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the first time that I heard it, laid out in the way that I'm going to share it with y'all tonight, it was mind-blowing to me and allowed me to understand for the first time that I was truly no longer alone, and that I was part of something massive, and that I was part of something historic. And when I learned about the heritage and the legacy of Alcoholics Anonymous, and the divine thread spun through the early history of AA, and how this thing came together, it fundamentally changed my level of respect for Alcoholics Anonymous. And as you all know, I talk about it a lot. I believe that it is important to instill our sponsees with a sense of respect for Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay? I believe that my job with sponsees is really kind of twofold. One is to keep them in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's my job, to be watching. What are they doing? Where are they? Are they in the middle of AA? If my sponsees are not in the middle of AA, what do I need to do to shepherd them back into the middle of AA? That's job number one. Job number two, I believe, is to instill them with a sense of respect for Alcoholics Anonymous, okay? And of course, my job as well is to take them through the 12 steps and to help them have a spiritual awakening as the result of the 12 steps as laid out in this book. That is what I mean when I say keeping them in the middle of AA, but also instilling them with a sense of respect for Alcoholics Anonymous. And my sense of respect for AA and who we are and where we came from and the heritage and the legacy of our fellowship changed completely when I realized that AA wasn't just about a church basement meeting with a 3-topic discussion meeting down the street, that there is a deep and rich and meaningful history to AA. And when I began to understand where we came from and what the original authentic intent of Alcoholics Anonymous was, it changed the way that I practiced my program. It changed my level of engagement and my level of reverence for AA. So, and I missed all that because I didn't read the foreword to the second edition, okay? All of that history that I'm sharing with you guys right now and that we're going to go through tonight is all in this book. It is in the foreword to the second edition. Now, we will jump around a little bit tonight, okay? And there are all of the pieces of history that I'm going to share with you guys tonight are all in our book. And they were always there, and I missed them. Okay. And some of them, you know, the dots, I needed to connect the dots, and thank God that it was Clancy. As I mentioned last week, I talked about Clancy at the State Line Conference in 2009 in Las Vegas, gave a talk on AA history. And that is where I got the telling of the history that I'm going to share with you guys tonight. We began to do it at Primary Purpose Group. We call it the Foundation Meeting. We used to do it at every meeting of PPG. We would have a breakout meeting in the back, and we would say, anyone who needs a refresher or is new to AA, come talk with us. And we would have this little meeting in the back, and we would go through what we're going to talk about tonight. And thank God that I heard Clancy early on talking about this history the way I'm going to share it with you guys tonight. So let's get into it. We're going to be back into the foreword to the second edition, which will be page XV, Roman numeral 15, as Rob kind of already wrote. So last week, guys, if there's one real, kind of takeaway from last week, I hope it was the understanding and the importance of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. If I were to ask you guys right now, who wrote the big book? I hope that your answer would be the first 100 members of Alcoholics Anonymous wrote the big book. The first 100 members. Was Bill holding the pen and hammering away at the typewriter? Yes, that's true. But everything he wrote was edited and approved by the first 100 members, okay? So this book was written by the first 100 sober members of AA. If I'm going to argue with anything in this book, I'm really arguing with the first 100 members. Many of us believe that this book was divinely inspired, and we'll talk more about that as this big book study continues on. The other thing that I hope you guys will take away was just those numbers that we talked about. Between 1939 and 1955, 300,000 copies of this book were published. From that number of books, 150,000 sober alcoholics were the result, okay? So for every 2 books, 1 person stayed sober. We had a 50% recovery rate, 50%. And we're going to talk more about that tonight. I'm going to double down on that percentage tonight, and you'll see what I mean. 50% of people who came to AA and really tried stayed sober at once. Why? Because between 1939 and 1955, there was only one thing to do in Alcoholics Anonymous, and that was practice the program as it was laid out in this book. There was nothing else, okay? And one of the things about this book, and remember this in context, guys, when we're reading this book, that for the most part, when people got sober between 1939 and 1955, oftentimes they had had no contact with anyone in Alcoholics Anonymous yet. They didn't go to a meeting. They didn't call central office. They didn't go to a treatment center. They got a copy of this book. And from the power of this book, and by doing the actions in this book, and then continuing to take those actions and go help someone else, that's how Alcoholics Anonymous grew, okay? And for every 300,000 copies of the book, we had 150,000 sober alcoholics. So my contention to you and my comment in this study will always be that we need to, as a fellowship, be sure that when we're working with our sponsees and we're engaged in our home group, that we are practicing the same reverence for the book that they would have had between 1939 and 1955. And when we get back to first principle Alcoholics Anonymous, fundamental Alcoholics Anonymous, connected to this book, we will get back to those original rates of recovery that we once had, okay? So, and we'll talk a little bit more about that tonight. You know, we used to be a book that created a fellowship, a book that gave rise to a fellowship. And today, I think a lot of times we're a fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous that also has a book once in a while, okay? And we need to get back to this book fundamentally. And when I do that, when I live this way, my life goes very well. And when I keep my sponsees in this book in the middle of AA, and this book is AA, by the way, okay? This book is called Alcoholics Anonymous. This is Alcoholics Anonymous, this book in its perfection. When I keep my sponsees in the middle of AA, recovery rates are very high. Okay, very good. But that is the one thing I want you guys to take away from last week. 1935 to 1939 to 1955, 300,000 copies of the book go out, 150,000 sober alcoholics. Those numbers speak for themselves, okay? So, with that said, guys, we're going to go back to the forward to the second edition. We're going to be on page XV, and we're going to be at the bottom, and we're going to dive right into the history here. The spark that was to flare, okay? So Brad, lovely to have you. Thank you for joining as always. My trusty sidekick. Appreciate you, Brad. Let's kick off in the reading, okay?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Hey, everybody. Brad Soto, recovered alcoholic.
Hi, Brad.
The spark that was to flare into the first AA group was struck at Akron, Ohio in June 1935 during a talk between a New York stockbroker and an Akron physician. 6 months earlier, the broker had been relieved of his drink obsession by a sudden spiritual experience following a meeting with an alcoholic friend who had been in contact with the Oxford groups of that day.
Okay, so I'm just going to pause there, Brad. Okay, so it says the spark that was to flare into the first AA group struck in Akron, Ohio, June 1935. So for anyone who doesn't know, the birth date, the anniversary date of Alcoholics Anonymous was June 10th, 1935. which is not the day that Bill and Bob met. Okay, because Dr. Bob drank one more time after he met Bill Wilson. Dr. Bob relapsed, okay, after being exposed to AA, okay? So if you're here and you are someone who has relapsed, don't be too hard on yourself, because so did our co-founder, okay? So June 10th, 1935 is the anniversary of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that is the date of Dr. Bob's last drink. What I want to point out, and I think that this is very important, our birth date is not December 11th, 1934. Okay, December 11th, 1934 is the date of Bill Wilson's last drink. Why do you think we wait until June 10th, 1935? Why do we consider that to be AA's anniversary? Because that was the first time that there was two of us. That was the first time that AA was a we program, not a singular individual. You guys with me on that? So June 10th, 1935, that is AA's anniversary date. So it says, between a New York stockbroker and an Akron physician. The New York stockbroker, Bill Wilson, our co-founder Bill Wilson, was a New York stockbroker. The Akron physician was Dr. Bob Smith, okay? Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob Smith are our two co-founders in Alcoholics Anonymous. So then it says 6 months earlier, the broker, Bill Wilson, had been relieved of his drinking obsession by a sudden spiritual experience following a meeting with an alcoholic friend. So that alcoholic friend is Ebby Thatcher, okay? Ebby Thatcher was a schoolhood friend of Bill Wilson's, who had been in contact with the Oxford groups of that day. And we'll talk more about the Oxford groups in a minute. Brad, can you just read us through the rest of that paragraph?
The paragraph I was on, sorry. Right?
Yes, please.
Okay. He had also been greatly helped by the late Dr. William D. Silkworth, a New York specialist in alcoholism, who is now accounted no less than a medical saint by AA members, and whose story of the early days of our society appears in the next pages. From this doctor, the broker had learned the grave nature of alcoholism. Though he could not accept all the tenets of the Oxford groups, he was convinced of the need for moral inventory, confession of personality defects, restitution to those harmed, helpfulness to others, and the necessity of belief in and dependence upon God.
Okay, so now, guys, I'm gonna thread in a little bit of what we call Joe and Charlie. We talked last week about a Joe and Charlie Big Book study, okay? And I'm gonna bring some of that into our conversation right now, because the overall history of Alcoholics Anonymous and the basic thrust of AA and the basic foundation of our program is actually deceptively simple. I had way overcomplicated it for many years. For like 5 years, I was in and out of AA on a regular basis, and I couldn't figure out what it really was and what it was really all about, and what it really meant. And I'm just going to share this right now. So Joe and Charlie talk about this. The three things. What are the three things that every alcoholic needs to know in order to achieve recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous? Okay. I need to know what the problem is. I need to know a solution to that problem. And then I need a program of action. Program of action that I can do to achieve the solution to overcome the problem. Okay. So at this point, guys, we're going to talk a little bit about the early history of AA, and where we're really going to begin, guys. If I can ask you to maybe flip ahead in your book, we're going to skip ahead on a couple pages, and we're going to go to page 26 really quickly, and we're going to talk about an individual by the name of Rowland Hazard. Okay. And this story is in our book. They don't name this individual Rowland Hazard, but Rowland Hazard, he was a spoiled rich kid, really, is what he was. He was a spoiled rich kid whose parents were extremely wealthy. They were heirs to he was the heir to the Allied Dye and Chemical company fortune. His parents were very wealthy, and he was a deeply troubled individual, however. And when this guy, Rowland Hazard, would drink, occasionally he would get an attack of what they call the nerves. And when he would get an attack of the nerves, he would occasionally drink too much. And this fellow, Roland Hazard, needed help. And so his parents started to send him all over North America to go see the best psychiatrists and the best doctors and the best kind of therapists and psychologists and all that kind of good stuff just to get him well. Okay. And so eventually his parents send him overseas, and he gets to meet with a guy named Carl Jung. Okay. And so Carl Jung, as you can see here, Dr. Carl Jung is one of the preeminent psychiatrists of all time. Okay. And from Carl Jung is where Roland Hazard gets what we refer to as step 2. Okay. Roland Hazard goes to see Carl Jung. He gets sober for a little while. He works with him one-on-one for like a year. He leaves and he gets drunk again almost immediately. And upon getting drunk, he goes back to the doctor. And we can see here on page 27, okay? And the doctor says, Roland, you have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. You're going to drink yourself to death. You're probably going to die. And I thought that I would be able to help you, but I don't think I will, okay? And Brad, do you want to read where he says, he said to the doctor, please?
Sure. He said to the doctor, "Is there no exception?" "Yes," replied the doctor, "there is. Exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. To me, these occurrences are phenomena. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. In fact, I have been trying to produce some such emotional rearrangement with you. With many individuals, the methods which I employed are successful, but I have never been successful with an alcoholic of your description."
Okay, so Roland Hazard then gets step 2 from Carl Jung. Okay, Dr. Carl Jung says to Roland Hazard, hey, if you want to stay sober, you have to find God. Okay, sound familiar to anybody? Anybody heard that one before? Okay, if you're going to stay sober, you have to find God, period. Okay, well, Roland Hazard says that should be easy because I go to church all the time. Dr. Jung says not so fast, okay, and not that easy. Okay, because step 2 isn't like that, man. I can't just flip a switch and suddenly get God. Okay, it doesn't work that way. So Roland Hazard leaves Carl Jung. He comes back to the United States, and he gets involved with a society known as the Oxford Group. So we just read about them on page XVI. So Roland Hazard gets connected with the Oxford Group, and the Oxford Group were really just a group of kind of upper middle class people who just wanted to have a deeper understanding and deeper experience of the power of God. Okay. And that was their original intent in the Oxford Group. Okay. So Roland Hazard gets involved with his Oxford Group, as you see down here, this Oxford Group, and begins to do this program of action that they have developed. Okay. And at base, their program, you know, they had the 4 absolutes, absolute love, absolute purity, absolute honesty, absolute unselfishness, but also they had developed through a priest, Baptist minister named Frank Buchmann, they had developed a program, a series of steps that any person can take who wants to have a deeper experience of God, okay? And at base, simply, if you want to understand our steps distilled down, okay, we can break it down into really 4 things. And we just talked about it here. It says, I'm back on page XVI now. Though he could not accept all the tenets of the Oxford Group, he was convinced of the need for moral inventory, confession of personality defects, restitution to those harmed, and helpfulness to others. Okay, so if you want to break down our program simply into 4 words, okay, the way that I think of it is surrender. Number 1, surrender. 2, confession. 3, restitution. 4, service. Okay, where do we get that from? Where do we get our program? And of course, those 4 steps now are expanded into the 12 steps. We get those from the Oxford group. Okay, so Roland Hazard gets involved with the Oxford group. He starts to do these steps, and for the first time, Roland Hazard is able to stay sober. Okay, then Roland Hazard hears about a friend of his that has been getting in trouble. This friend has been getting in trouble. Okay, and so what are they going to do about that? And this friend is in he's in court, is what he is. He's going in front of a judge because he's gotten his third DUI in the state of Vermont. And at that point, if you get 3 DUIs in the state of Vermont, you go directly to jail. Okay, seems a little extreme to me, but that's okay. All right. But anyway, Ebby Thatcher is his name. Ebby Thatcher is on his way to jail, and 2 of Roland Hazard's friends come to him and say, Roland, a guy named Shep Cornell and a guy named Seba Graves were their names. And they come to Roland and they say, Roland, Ebby, your old friend from school, is in front of a judge, and you know the judge. Your father knows the judge. And you've been able to stay sober here with us in the Oxford group. And maybe if we go talk to this judge, you'll let Ebby Thatcher go, and we can help him like we helped you. So Roland does just that. He goes and talks to the judge, and they let Ebby Thatcher go. Okay. And Ebby Thatcher then starts to work the steps of the Oxford group: surrender, confession, restitution, and service. And understand at this point, guys, this is before Alcoholics Anonymous even exists. Okay, this is long before AA. At this point, there is no AA. There is only the Oxford group. But Ebby Thatcher manages to stay sober. Okay, and they come to Ebby and to Ebby Thatcher one day. And they say, well, Ebby, it's your turn to go help somebody. Okay, and Ebby Thatcher says, well, I don't really want to go help somebody. That's kind of embarrassing. And they say, do you want to go help somebody, or do you want to go back and talk to the judge again? And suddenly Ebby was overcome with the spirit of service in Alcoholics Anonymous. Suddenly he wanted very much to go, for sure. Yeah, I'm more than willing to go help somebody. And so long story short, Ebby Thatcher then goes and talks to our co-founder, Bill Wilson, who was a horrible drunk living in Manhattan at that time, living off his wife. Now, on the other side of this situation, okay, Bill Wilson had been living in Manhattan, dying drunk. He had been in and out of the hospital numerous times. It says here he was greatly helped by the late Dr. William D. Silkworth, okay? And it says, from the doctor, Bill Wilson learned of the grave nature of alcoholism. Okay. From the doctor, the broker learned the grave nature of alcoholism. Okay. And we're going to talk in great detail over the next many weeks about the grave nature of alcoholism. Okay. And this really is the center of our problem, okay? So we talk about what is our problem. We get our problem from Dr. William D. Silkworth, the grave nature of alcoholism. And if you want, you can put these notes right now. Physical allergy, mental obsession, okay? That is the grave nature of alcoholism, because even at this point, even though they're staying sober in the Oxford group, Roland Hazard, Ebby Thatcher, they do not know how bad their problem is. Okay, they do not know about the disease of alcoholism. We don't get that until Ebby Thatcher sits with Bill Wilson on one fateful day in Bill Wilson's kitchen. Okay, and so what I'm going to ask you guys to do with me right now is we're going to fast forward to page 9. Okay, page 9 very quickly. And I know we're bouncing around a little bit, but I just want to connect the dots. So on page 27, we met Roland Hazard. Okay, Roland Hazard meets Carl Jung. Okay, in this diagram here, that is where we get our solution. Roland Hazard learns from Carl Jung that we need the vital spiritual experience. He comes back to the United States, gets connected to the Oxford group, learns of a program of action. But now in this moment, through Ebby Thatcher, now sitting in Bill Wilson's kitchen, Bill Wilson is going to learn about this program of action. And so let's talk about that for a minute, okay? So on page 9, it says the door, Brad, do you want to read the door opened and he stood there?
You bet. The door opened and he stood there, fresh-skinned and glowing. There was something about his eyes. He was inexplicably different. What had happened? I pushed a drink across the table. He refused it. Disappointed but curious, I wondered what had got into the fellow. He wasn't himself. Come, what's all this about? I queried. He looked straight at me. Simply but smilingly, he said, I've got religion.
Okay, so I just want to point out here, guys, don't trip out. Don't don't get bugged out that we're talking about religion here, okay? Because Alcoholics Anonymous is not a religious organization. However, it is true that we come from a group called the Oxford Group. So when Ebby Thatcher is sitting there with Bill Wilson and he says, I've got religion, what he really means is that I have been with the Oxford Group and I've been working this program of action in the Oxford Group, okay? So he is coming and offering Bill Wilson this solution for the first time, okay? And he talks about what has happened to him, okay? And we'll talk more about this when we get to Bill's story. So now Bill Wilson has all 3 pieces of information that are required for you and I right now today to stay sober, okay? I needed to know what the problem is. Bill Wilson had the problem. He got the grave nature of alcoholism, physical allergy, mental obsession from Dr. Silkworth. And now when Ebby Thatcher comes to talk with him in this moment, he learns about the vital spiritual experience, the need for a vital spiritual experience, and the need for a program of action, okay? So, Brad, I'm back on page 9. If you can go to, but he did no ranting, okay? Ebby did no ranting. This is Ebby Thatcher now talking to Bill Wilson, but he did no ranting.
But he did no ranting. In a matter-of-fact way, he told how 2 men had appeared in court persuading the judge to suspend his commitment. They had told of a simple religious idea and a practical program of action. That was 2 months ago, and the result was self-evident. It worked.
Okay, so again, guys, how simple is that? He talked of a simple religious or spiritual idea, a simple spiritual idea. That simple spiritual idea is simply that God is more powerful than alcoholism. That is it. God, as you understand him, is more powerful than alcoholism. A simple spiritual idea and a practical program of action. That was it. That was 2 months ago. And the result was self-evident. It worked. Okay. Ebby Thatcher had not been sober for 2 months in many years. Okay. So now I just want to point out that Bill Wilson, there's nothing particularly special. Bill Wilson is not more intelligent than us. He's not more spiritual than any of us. He's not God's special little chosen snowflake or anything like that. Bill Wilson is simply the first person in the history of the world to have access to all 3 pieces of information. Bill Wilson is the first person to know what the problem is, what the solution is, and what the program of action is, okay? So now, guys, going back to the forward to the 2nd edition, and I went through that very quickly. If we have questions, that's okay. You guys feel free to ask. But now we're going to go back. We're going to go back to page XVI, okay? And so Bill Wilson, now, if you want to read, Brad, let's go to prior to his journey to Akron.
Okay. Prior to his journey to Akron, the broker had worked hard with many alcoholics on the theory that only an alcoholic could help an alcoholic, but he had succeeded only by keeping sober himself. The broker had gone to Akron on a business venture which had collapsed, leaving him greatly in fear that he might start drinking again. He suddenly realized that in order to save himself, he must carry his message to another alcoholic. That alcoholic turned out to be the Akron physician.
Okay, so Bill Wilson, and what's key here, guys, is that from the moment he leaves the town's hospital, Bill Wilson gets sober December 11th, 1934, after speaking with Ebby Thatcher. He meets Ebby Thatcher in early November. Okay, he starts drinking again on Armistice Day, 1934, which is November 11th, 1934. He drinks for a month. Returns to the hospital. December 11th, 1934 is Bill Wilson's last drink. And it says here the broker had been relieved of his drink obsession by a sudden spiritual experience following a meeting with an alcoholic friend who had been in contact with the Oxford groups of that day. Ebby Thatcher comes to the hospital and goes through the Oxford group program of action with Bill Wilson. Bill Wilson stays sober. He has a profound spiritual experience in the town's hospital and realizes that he has a calling to carry this message of recovery to other people, okay? And associates his spiritual experience with his own drinking and realizes that he is being called to go help other alcoholics find what he has found. He spends the next 6 months working with like puking street drunks, okay? Picking up these street drunks and trying to get the whole world sober. And that's it. And he's telling them about this beautiful white light spiritual experience that he's had and this overwhelming God consciousness. And he's really coming off like a holy roller. And none of them are getting sober. And after 6 months, he almost gives up. And he goes to his wife, Lois, and says, Lois, none of these guys are getting sober. I'm going to give up. And I think as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, Lois says something that turns the tide of history. She says, Bill, you're staying sober. You're staying sober, and that's good enough for me, okay? And Bill Wilson then has a business venture. He goes to Akron, Ohio. In Akron, his business deal falls apart, and he knows he's on the verge of getting drunk. But in that moment, he is restored to sanity. He is restored to sanity and does not go into the bar at the hotel. Instead, he goes, and it's a famous story in AA, he goes over to the phone and starts dialing and starts calling through different church directories to find another alcoholic he can work with. He gets connected through a lady named Henrietta Seiberling to Ann Smith, who then introduces Bill Wilson to her husband, Dr. Bob. Okay, that's on Mother's Day, 1935. Mother's Day, 1935, Dr. Bob and Bill Wilson meet. Dr. Bob then, well, let's talk about this actually at the bottom of page XVI. So this physician, it says, so this physician, this is Dr. Bob we're talking about now. Okay, at the bottom of page XVI. Brad?
This physician had repeatedly tried spiritual means to resolve his alcoholic dilemma, but had failed. But when the broker gave him Dr. Silkworth's description of alcoholism and its hopelessness, the physician began to pursue the spiritual remedy for his malady with a willingness he had never before been able to muster. He sobered never to drink again up to the moment of his death in 1950. This seemed to prove that one alcoholic could affect another as no non-alcoholic could. It also indicated that strenuous work, one alcoholic with another, was vital to permanent recovery.
Okay, brilliant. So it says Dr. Bob had already repeatedly tried spiritual means. In fact, Dr. Bob had already been attending Oxford group meetings, okay? But he wasn't willing to do what was really required, okay? He was like a lot of us, like I was, man. I was working a long time in AA on a program called AA Light, okay? Take what I like and leave the rest, okay? I wanted to work Kevin's program, okay? And Dr. Bob was actually balking at doing a lot of the steps that are required of us. In fact, does anybody know the step in the Oxford group that Dr. Bob didn't want to do? The step that he refused to take was step 9. He refused to make amends to people. Okay? Didn't want to do it. Consequently, he couldn't stay sober. But when Bill Wilson shares with him the grave nature of alcoholism that he got from Dr. Silkworth, then Dr. Bob could see and understand truly that he was for the first time in a trap from which there was no escape on his own. Okay? And in fact, when Bill Wilson, before he goes to Akron, goes to talk to Dr. Silkworth and says, why are none of these guys getting sober? For 6 months, I'm working with these guys. None of them are getting sober. And he says, Bill, that's because you're trying to talk to these guys about spirituality, like you're some type of Buddha holy roller, and none of them want to hear that, okay? What they want to hear is that you used to drink like they drink, that you understand how they feel, that you understand what they think. Tell them what I told you about the grave nature of alcoholism. Talk to them about the hopelessness of their condition, and you will start to build some level of identification and understanding. And until we can build with another alcoholic that level of understanding and that level of identification, nothing else can be done. Okay? Because trust me, nobody is listening. Nobody is listening. Okay? I hope that I never talk to an alcoholic. And God forbid I ever talk down at an alcoholic. I hope that I always talk with another alcoholic, that I understand how you feel, the way that you think, and the way that you drink. I understand completely. Okay. I see right now on this meeting, right now, I'm looking at people that I know are suffering right now. I can see them right now. And I want you to know, I understand. I understand how you feel. I know what you're going through. I know the fear that you have. I understand. And I also understand that there is a way out. And I have found a way out. And that is what we are here to talk about tonight. And that is the message that Bill Wilson is bringing to Dr. Bob. Not that I'm a holy spiritual person, you should be more like me. Brothers and sisters, we are far more alike in our defects of character than we are in our virtues. Are we not? Okay. And it's when we can start to really share that level of identification that we really start to understand. Okay. And that's what compassion is, by the way. Okay. Compassion for one another. Pity is I feel sorry for you. Okay. Sympathy is I feel sorry for you. I feel sympathy for you. Empathy is I know how you feel. But there is something that is vastly more important in Alcoholics Anonymous for us, and that is compassion. And compassion means that we are the same. We are exactly the same. I remember a little while ago, I was walking over to a treatment center here. We're going to talk with one of my sponsees, and he's kind of a high bottom drunk, I'll say. We're going in, and he's like, I really don't know what I'm going to talk to these guys about. And I said, hey, Buster, don't ever forget, you have the exact same disease as every person in that place right now. Okay. You have simply just found a way out. And it was like something hit him between the eyes. He suddenly got it. Okay. And this is what Bill Wilson is bringing to Dr. Bob in this moment. Okay. And so he brings to Dr. Bob this idea of the grave nature of alcoholism. And from that moment on, Dr. Bob can see that there is no other way. There is no way out for him other than to just do this work. And so he begins to go mend fences, as Dr. Bob says, which he means making amends. And from that moment forth, June 10th, 1935, that is the beginning of Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay. Brad, back to you. Hence the two men.
Right. Hence the two men set to work almost frantically upon alcoholics arriving in the ward of the Akron City Hospital. Their very first case, a desperate one, recovered immediately and became AA number 3.
So his name is Bill Dodson, D-O-T-S-O-N. AA number 3, Bill Dodson. Dodson. D-O-D-S-O-N. Dodson.
He never had another drink. This work at Akron continued through the summer of 1935. There were many failures, but there was an occasional heartening success. When the broker returned to New York in the fall of 1935, the first AA group had actually been formed, though no one realized it at the time. A second small group promptly took shape at New York, to be followed in 1937 with the start of a third at Cleveland. Besides these, there were scattered alcoholics who had picked up the basic ideas in Akron or New York, who were trying to form groups in other cities. By late 1937, the number of members having substantial sobriety time behind them was sufficient to convince the membership that a new light had entered the dark world of the alcoholic. It was now time, the struggling groups thought, to place their message and unique experience before the world. This determination bore fruit in the spring of 1939 by the publication of this volume. The membership had then reached about 100 men and women. The fledgling society, which had been nameless, now began to be called Alcoholics Anonymous from the title of its own book. The flying blind period ended, and AA entered a new phase of its pioneering time. With the appearance of the new book, a great deal began to happen. Dr. Harry Emerson Fosdick, the noted clergyman, reviewed it with approval. In the fall of 1939, Fulton Osler, then editor of Liberty, printed a piece in his magazine called Alcoholics and God. This brought a rush of 800 frantic inquiries into the little New York office, which meanwhile had been established. Each inquiry was painstakingly answered. Pamphlets and books were sent out. Businessmen traveling out of existing groups were referred to these prospective newcomers. New groups started up, and it was found, to the astonishment of everyone, that AA's message could be transmitted in the mail as well as by word of mouth. By the end of 1939, it was estimated that 800 alcoholics were on their way to recovery.
Okay, so one of the things I want to talk about, I'm going to talk about this very quickly because I want to get through the second, forward to the second edition tonight before 7 p.m. And we've got a little bit to read yet. So they had 100 sober members between Akron and Cleveland and New York City. Bill Wilson goes back to New York City. Okay, he can't live in Akron forever, so he goes back to New York City. He starts carrying the message in New York. They start to build a group there. Okay, and then what they start to realize, though, is that the message is starting to get distilled, and the message is starting to get changed a little bit. Okay, and have you ever played? You remember the game Telephone, where somebody would come up with something, and then you go around the circle, and by the time it gets to the end, it's completely changed. Well, that's what was happening with AA, and they could tell. They knew, because the way that people were doing it in Cleveland was different than Akron, was different than in New York. So they decided that they had three things that they wanted to try. Number one is they were going to have a professional class of AAs who would go like knock door to door and get paid to go carry the message. They were also going to build a big, beautiful, huge, massive hospital with lots of different floors and lots of fancy stuff. And then they were also going to write a book. Okay. And ultimately, everything fell apart, and none of it was able to happen other than they were able to get this book published. Okay. And that is how they really solidified the original message of Alcoholics Anonymous and prevented this continual game of telephone that was happening. In one place to really lock in the original message of Alcoholics Anonymous. And by the way, as I've said before, but I just want to highlight it again, it says our fellowship got its name from the title of this book, not the other way around. Okay. We are named after this book. This book is Alcoholics Anonymous, okay? And we are named after the book, not the other way around. Again, highlighting the importance of this book in our fellowship, okay? Brad, back to you.
In the spring of 1940, John D. Rockefeller Jr. gave a dinner for many of his friends, to which he invited AA members to tell their stories. News of this got on the world wires, inquiries poured in again, and many people went to the bookstores to get the book Alcoholics Anonymous. By March 1941, the membership had shot up to 2,000. Then Jack Alexander wrote a feature article in the Saturday Evening Post and placed such a compelling picture of AA before the general public that alcoholics in need of help really deluged us. By the close of 1941, AA numbered 8,000 members. The mushrooming process was in full swing. AA had become a national institution.
So what Bill Wilson, and really the first 100, and really one of his key partners was a guy named Hank Parkhurst. Hank Parkhurst had worked for the Standard Oil Company, had connections with the Rockefellers. So Bill and Hank really thought, this is it, man. We're going to get rich now. We're going to get connected to the Rockefellers. Here's the touch now. Now we're going to get the big money. Okay. And thank God that John D. Rockefeller was able to see through Bill Wilson and Hank Parkhurst alcoholic scheming, and could see that a large amount of money was going to destroy this thing, and that they had to keep it simple and spiritual. Okay. And so they didn't get the money. There was no big, and thank God, because that money would have killed us. I'm sure of it. Okay, I think most of us agree. If we would have gotten millions of dollars at that point, like it would not have been good for the first 100 members of Alcoholics Anonymous. Can you imagine? Okay, so thank God he had the foresight to see, no, that's not going to work, and so we didn't get a lot of money, but we did get some publicity out of it, and that was helpful. So much publicity that a guy named Jack Alexander of the Saturday Evening Post was going to write an article about alcoholics. It was called "Alcoholics and God," I believe, was the name of the article. Rob, are you posting? What is that the name of the article? What was the name of the article that he wrote?
You got it right.
Okay. So Jack Alexander, one of the things that I just like to note about this article that he wrote, Jack Alexander was famous for uncovering and exposing frauds. That's what he was known for. He was known as a fraud buster. Okay. And that's how he kind of built his reputation as a reporter. He had just finished a big expose on the Philadelphia Labor Union and how they were all connected to crime and stuff like that, that he had just written a big expose on that. The next thing his publisher said, we've been hearing about this thing AA with this guy, Rockefeller just met with these guys from AA. Go in and figure out what's the angle here. What's the scam that these guys are pulling? And Jack Alexander comes and meets with us and is invited in and discovers, and it's a point of pride for me. I get, kind of touched thinking about it, that he discovers that we are exactly who we said we were. And we truly have no profit motive. There was no scheme. There was no angle. That we are actually true and genuine and really have no other ulterior motive other than to help alcoholics who are suffering. And he writes a very favorable article about us. And that was very rare for Jack Alexander to do something like that. And that had a profound impact on the growth of our society. So back to you, Brad.
Our society then entered a fearsome and exciting adolescent period. The test that it faced was this: could these large numbers of erstwhile erratic alcoholics successfully meet and work together? Would there be quarrels over membership, leadership, and money? Would there be strivings for power and prestige? Would there be schisms which would split AA apart? Soon AA was beset by these very problems on every side and in every group. But out of this frightening and first disrupting experience, the conviction grew that AAs had to hang together or die separately. We had to unify our fellowship or pass off the scene. As we discovered the principles by which individual alcoholics could live, so we had to evolve principles by which the AA groups and AA as a whole could survive and function effectively. It was thought that no alcoholic man or woman could be excluded from our society, that our leaders might serve but never govern, that each group was to be autonomous, and there was to be no professional class of therapy. There were to be no fees or dues. Our expenses were to be met by our own voluntary contributions. There was to be the least possible organization, even in our service centers. Our public relations were to be based upon attraction rather than promotion. It was decided that all members ought to be anonymous at the level of press, radio, TV, and films, and in no circumstances should we give endorsements, make alliances, or enter public controversies. This was the substance of AA's 12 traditions, which are stated in full on page 562 of this book. Though none of these principles had the force of rules or laws, they had become so widely accepted by 1950 that they were confirmed by our first international conference held at Cleveland. Today, the remarkable unity of AA is one of the greatest assets that our society has. While the internal difficulties of our adolescent period were being ironed out, public acceptance of AA grew by leaps and bounds. For this, there were two principal reasons: the large numbers of recoveries and reunited homes. These made their impression everywhere. Of alcoholics who came to AA and really tried, 50% got sober at once and remained that way. 25% sobered up after some relapses, and among the remainder, those who stayed on with AA showed improvement.
All right, guys. See, I wasn't making it up. 50%. 300,000 copies of the book between 1939 and 1955, 150,000 sober alcoholics. 50% of people who came to Alcoholics Anonymous stayed sober. 25% more after that. after a relapse or two stayed sober. 75% of people who came to AA were getting sober between 1939 and 1955. Why? Because what were they doing? This. There was nothing else to do. They went and got connected to this book, did the 12 steps, did that work, and then went and carried the message to someone else. And that's how AA grew. There is in Calgary here, I'm quite proud to say, as far as we know, and I have it on pretty good authority from multiple people, the longest term sober member in all of Alcoholics Anonymous anywhere on the planet lives in Calgary. He's a man named Jim Cito. Okay. I want to say 70. Brad, do you know, is it 70? Am I crazy? He's sober.
I think
70?
it's close to. I think it's close to 70. I haven't
Anyway,
seen
I mentioned that because yeah, I think it's close to 70. That's amazing. Actually, as I think about that, he got sober like in like 1955 that he got sober. Okay. Right around the time of the traditions. Like, can you imagine? Anyway, why do I mention that? I asked Jim one time because he told me that at that time in the province of Alberta, when he got sober, there was 2 Alcoholics Anonymous meetings in the entire province when he got sober. And I said, my God, Jim, like as a guy, like they were telling me 90 meetings in 90 days or we'll refund your misery. How do you stay sober on 1 meeting a week? How is that even possible? He said, I'll tell you exactly how, Kevin. First of all, number 1, you prayed all the time. Number 1, you prayed all the time. Number 2, you never, ever, ever missed your home group. And number 3, we tried to work with newcomers all the time. Okay? And when he was doing that, he was able to stay sober. When we stay connected to this book, connected to the original program, the original intent of Alcoholics Anonymous, do this work, go through those steps quickly, have a spiritual awakening as a result, and then go carry that message to others and never, ever, ever miss our home group. I promise you, brothers and sisters, the recovery rates in Alcoholics Anonymous, we say 50%, I say 100%. I say that Alcoholics Anonymous works 100% of the time. The problem is that I don't work 100% of the time. Okay? But Alcoholics Anonymous is infallible. Why? Because we are no longer living on our own willpower. We are living on a much more important power, and that is the power of God. And the power of God is infallible. God is infallible by definition. If he's fallible, he's not God. By definition, God is infallible. And if I humbly rely on God and stay dedicated to this program and carrying his message to other alcoholics, I believe the success rates in Alcoholics Anonymous are 100%. Okay, you guys with me on that? All right, Brad, let's keep going.
Other thousands came to a few AA meetings and at first decided they didn't want the program. But great numbers of these, about 2 out of 3, began to return as time passed. Another reason for the wide acceptance of AA was the ministration of friends in medicine, religion, and the press, together with innumerable others who became our able and persistent advocates. Without such support, AA could have made only the slowest progress. Some of the recommendations of AA's early medical and religious friends will be found further on in this book. Alcoholics Anonymous is not a religious organization, neither does AA take any particular medical point of view, though we cooperate widely with the men of medicine as well as with the men of religion. Alcohol being no respecter of persons, we are an accurate cross-section of America, and in distant lands, the same democratic evening up process is now going on. By personal religious affiliation, we include Catholics, Protestants, Jews, Hindus, and a sprinkling of Muslims and Buddhists. More than 15% of us are women. At present, our membership is pyramiding at the rate of about 20% a year. So far upon the total problem of Of several million actual and potential alcoholics in the world, we have made only a scratch. In all probability, we shall never be able to touch more than a fair fraction of the alcohol problem and all its ramifications. Upon therapy for the alcoholic himself, we surely have no monopoly. Yet it is our great hope that all those who have as yet found no answer may begin to find one in the pages of this book, and will presently join us on the high road to a new freedom.
Amen. All right, guys. That's it for tonight. Next week, we will quickly read forward to the 3rd edition, forward to the 4th edition, and then we're going to get into the real meat, man. Then we're going to kick off into the doctor's opinion. And I'm excited already, man. I'm excited already for anyone who's never been through that work, for anyone who's never been taken through the doctor's opinion, I'm already excited to go through that with you. And for you folks who have been through it many times, I'm excited to go through it with you as well. I never get tired of it, man. It's for me, it's like reading poetry. It's like hearing, divine music. It's the best stuff in the world, man. And I'm pumped. Yeah, and it's the reason that if I have air in my lungs today, it is because of this book, like that. And I mean that sincerely. So anyway, that's it, guys. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We will close with the Lord's Prayer. And then, as always, don't run away, guys, because we're going to we'll go around the room and say hello to everybody. And I love meeting you guys. It's one of my favorite parts of the week. Rob, you were just waving. Did you need anything?
Yeah, I just want to make a correction, I do apologize. The article in Liberty Magazine was Alcoholics and God, and that was in 1939. Okay.
Yeah.
The article that was in the Saturday Evening Post was called Alcoholics Anonymous, and that was in 1941. So I just wanted to clarify that, and I do apologize because
I was surprised because I thought that I had it wrong. So the article was just called Alcoholics Anonymous. Jack Alexander's article was just called Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yes.
Yeah, Fulton Owsler's article was called Alcoholics and God. Yeah, right on. Good.
100%.
And that makes sense. That tracks because in 1939, it is not, I don't think Alcoholics Anonymous would have existed yet. So we called it Alcoholics and God. Then Jack Alexander, 1941, the book would have been written. So we would call it Alcoholics Anonymous. Beautiful. Okay, guys. That's it. That's all. Let's close with the Lord's Prayer, and then we'll go around the room and say hello to everybody. And I love seeing all you guys. I love getting to know you. Okay. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen. All right.